My husband abused me, physically and mentally, so I decide I'm going to leave him. Well, imagine my surprise when I finally gather enough courage to do it. I left him, and then I find out just a little bit later that my sister is now dating him, and guess what? They're engaged. Well, you know what? I'm not gonna let that slide. Even if my family won't stick up for me, I'm gonna stick up for myself. And I decide to go after her ex-boyfriend, who, by the way, she's still in love with, and he broke her heart. Oh, boo-hoo. I was at the mere age of 22 when I met Jake. I was fresh out of college and started a new job. To relieve the stress and strain, I would frequent a dingy little restaurant to have their special on the menu: chicken parmesan and pasta. As the first bite melted into my mouth, I would feel the stress just disappear. And in that restaurant is where I first laid eyes on Jake. He had ordered the same dish as me, which caught my eye as I was the only customer who would go for this strange dish. Well, we exchanged hellos, and our conversation started with how great the dish tasted, despite it being unusual and not like the regular chicken parm. And the rest was history. After 6 long years of dating, meeting each other's parents and friends, fights, we tied the knot. The first years of our wedding were absolute bliss. We traveled places, did all things that we planned, and our love seemed to only grow. But it all went bad soon for some reason I could not comprehend. But Jake was not the person he seemed to be. During our courtship years, he was the most sweetest man I've ever met. He would go out of his way and take time off from work just so he could take me out on a date. We would watch football and have beer with our friends on the weekends. He never failed to surprise me with gifts of the occasional flowers and even compliments. Everything was going really well, and just the way I had thought things to be, like when suddenly it all started to change. I witnessed a major change in Jake's demeanor. Jake, my husband, who I really loved, who I dated for more than 5 years, had become a person unknown. It started slow with him expressing his anger and avoiding me. He seemed annoyed when I asked to spend time like we did before, and said he had piles of work to finish and had no time to be a teenager and hang out with me. Eventually, it moved him to abusing me, physically. When he had a terrible day at work, he would come home drunk and punch walls just to intimidate me. When I tried to retaliate or talk to him, I would get slapped. I'd stayed thinking it was work stress or the alcohol that was bringing out the worst in him. I tried to help by one day getting our favorite chicken parmesan and pasta from the same restaurant we used to favor. Jake had arrived home, took one look at the table laid out for him, grabbed the pasta and threw it in the trash. He proceeded to yell obscenities at me and slammed the bedroom door right in my face. So, I decided enough was enough. I packed my bags and left the next morning. I showed up at my parents' house, shaking in fear, with tears streaming down my face. I stayed at my parents' where they supported me in coming to terms with it all. We talked it through, and I came to a decision that I was not able to live with the man that he had now become. After putting in a lot of efforts for him and trying to change him back to the person he was before, I decided it was for the best that this relationship ended, so I filed for divorce. I did not want to contact him, so instead I sent him the divorce papers through a lawyer. Though, my parents were in support of my decision, whereas my younger sister Emily did not like my decision at all. You see, she had said, and I quote, "You don't value your relationship or know how to handle a man like a real woman." These words felt like a slap to my face, and I was taken aback in time to how Emily and I were when we were younger. I was foolish to believe growing up would possibly change her. Emily and I, we never got along well. Sibling rivalry, and our parents used to call it that, but to me, Emily and I were opposite sides of a coin. I was the older sister, known for my grace and intelligence and charm. I excelled in academics, always achieving top grades and earning praises from our parents. Emily was skilled in different ways. She was a free spirit full of creativity and passion. She loved painting and was extremely skilled at it. She could make lifelike paintings of living things, but her achievements often went unnoticed in the shadow of my accomplishments. I remember Emily hating me for a really long time. She would often take over all my favorite stuff, argue with me on baseless topics, and even go as far as to spread mean rumors about me in school. I was relieved to be rid of her when I moved away for a job. I was extremely popular with the boys for my good looks, and you could say Emily was jealous of that, as I could maintain an intellectual conversation with them and she never could. There was an incident I remember after which I had a major fallout with Emily. She had a crush on one of my classmates and, well, had called dibs on him. This was code for me not to talk to him, so much as walk in his direction even. I complied, seeing as I wanted my sister to have someone for herself once and craved for a good relationship for her. However, one day, he ends up asking me out, and seeing as how it would be rude of me to decline, I went with him and went on a date. It was a major coincidence for Emily to be dining at the same ice cream parlor. Well, one of her friends noticed us and pointed us out to her. Emily stormed over, knocking over my ice cream cup in the process, and I went home later and tried to get a word in with her. But she had locked me out. She refused to speak to me or even look at me. It had taken her a few months to a year to even get over the incident and start talking to me again. But the damage was done. At the time of my divorce, Emily had a boyfriend of around 4 years, Ryan. I'd only met him a couple times, but those were enough for me to discern that he was a real gentleman. A few incidents had made me think that Emily's being controlling towards him and did not let the man make his own choices. She would speak on his behalf, even decide stuff for him while we would stand there keeping mom. To me, Emily seemed toxic, but to her it was a perfect and ideal relationship. At times I would be jealous of Emily. Occasionally I would see the two of them, Ryan and Emily, happy together and wondered whether I was really bad at handling relationships. And whether it was me that drove Jake to drink and, well, become abusive. It had been 4 years since mine and Jake's separation. Things have been quite peaceful, but a lot of things have happened since then. I changed jobs and shifted back with my mom and dad. The first few months were really difficult. I had the emotional baggage to deal with and also had to work hard to earn stable income at my new job. I had not heard from Emily since 4 years, and I wondered what became of her. My mom had news that Emily had broken up with Ryan. Apparently, he had enough of her controlling behavior. He had taken her to an office party with all his colleagues and their spouses, and she started an argument with him right there in front of them, screaming out loud and insulting and embarrassed him. And that's when he decided to break things off for good. He had come home, packed his bags, and left while Emily kept screaming after him to stay. Emily had shifted to a different town nearby a few weeks after that, and that was the last our family heard about Ryan. I realized that it might have been tough for her too, but I could not offer much sympathy as she had been the toxic one in the relationship. Had she been more respecting of Ryan as a person, maybe they would still have been together. When I got to know about all this, I realized it's Emily that's had a bad handling relationship, not me. I got myself a small apartment, enough to suffice a person. It was situated quite close to my parents' place, and in that way I would be closer to them to pay them frequent visits, and I would not be totally alone. One fine day, I returned home from work and decided to pay my mom and dad a visit, as it's been a while since I did that. I walked in to find Emily on the couch, seated right beside Jake. I tried keeping my anger in check when I asked my mother why he's here. Emily, as she usually does, spoke for my mom when she said Jake was not here for me, but to discuss an important matter that involved Emily. Well, I noticed a rather large shiny ring on Emily's finger, and I put 2 and 2 together and it clicked. Emily was engaged to Jake? I voiced my shock rather than just think it. I was appalled that Emily was going forward with it after she knew what all happened between me and Jake, but I should have expected it was something she would do. Emily does not pay much attention to me as she goes on and on about how in love with Jake she was, and how, well, he was indeed treating her like a princess. They had been seeing each other for quite some time until Jake decides to pop the question. Jake pulled my mother aside to apologize for the way that he treated me, and how he was now a truly changed man. Well, my mom was a bit hesitant after hearing what he had said, but had no other option than to accept his half-butted apology for Emily's sake. When others were busy with small talk, I took Emily aside and I asked her why she was doing this. Even after everything she knew about Jake, why had she decided to marry him? When confronted, she confessed she did it to show me how to handle a real man like Jake. Our history of sibling rivalry is a convoluted one, but this move felt unusually cruel. As courtesy, Emily and Jake had to invite me to their wedding. I was stung by her words and decided to attend the wedding to show that I was not defeated. Well, the wedding date was set within a few weeks. I decided to meet up with Ryan the next day as I had devised a plan. I was allowed to take a special +1 to the wedding, and I decided to take Ryan. Emily and Ryan's breakup had been devastating for Emily, and I wanted her to feel the sting of the past just as I was being forced to confront mine. I met Ryan at his place. He'd been doing well after his breakup with Emily. He had finally stood up for himself and had become confident in his manner. He was now the manager of a private company, and his house reflected that. With hair sleeked back and clothes ironed to the point where not even a single crease was visible, he opened the door and smiled at me, pulling me in for a hug. Well, we caught up with everything that's been going on with each other's lives, how I had divorced Jake and reclaimed my life. I informed him that Emily was to be wedded soon, and she was going to marry Jake. Ryan, like I was, seemed shocked after hearing the news. He offered his sympathies to me and asked me how I felt on the matter. I told him I was not too keen to have Jake included in the family again, and I was disgusted by the fact that my younger sister was marrying my ex-husband despite knowing of his abuse. I told Ryan I would be attending the wedding, and that's where he came in. I asked him if he would want to attend the wedding as my +1. I told him, as my sister was marrying my ex-husband, it would be like irony that I was there with her ex-boyfriend. Well, as you can imagine, Ryan seemed hesitant at first. He did not want to meet Emily and reopen a closed wound. I asked him, please, for my sake, as I did not want to have a breakdown in front of a narcissistic man. Ryan, being the good friend he was, accepted to come along and be my emotional aid during the wedding. Wedding preparations were abuzz, and I kept mom and stick to shadows as I watched from afar. Emily and Jake were playing pretend and looked like they were faking smiles in front of family and friends. I could only think about how hurt Emily would be after seeing Ryan at her wedding and the solace it would bring me. I had not expected this from Emily, but this time she had gone too far, and she needs to be taught a lesson. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. I have 2 updates for this story, and oh boy, are things about to go wild. If you're not subscribed to the channel, take a second right now, click that subscribe button, and let's jump into update number 1. It was a blissful day, but not for Emily. She had waken up in a panic, and like any other bride, her wedding day seemed to be filled with stress. As she got ready, she was snapping at her bridesmaids and everyone who was present with her. The flowers, music, and food needed to be just perfect. Final touches were done to her makeup, and Emily set off the venue. They were going to be wedded at Jake's villa that his parents have bought for him. I called up Ryan and asked him to pick me up after she left, and within the next few minutes, Ryan showed up in his car, and a glorious car at that. If not hurt, Emily would definitely be jealous of him. All eyes were on Ryan as we walked in. He had worn a rather expensive suit and looked like something right off the runway. There was a silent chatter amongst the crowd, and the bride and groom were standing at the altar ready to begin. Emily turned around to see what all the chatter was about. As soon as her eyes met Ryan's eyes, she stopped in her tracks. Jake, too, seemed appalled at the sight, and her confidence and facade shattered as expected. Tears started streaming down her face as she ran across the hallway to a private room. There was scattered gossip and whispers as Jake and my parents ran after her. Ryan and I followed suit. Emily sat in the corner on a chair as she bawled her eyes out like a baby, and Jake tried to comfort her. She turned to look up at Ryan and me as we walked in, and her face silently asked me, "Why? Why was I doing this to her?" The crowd started filling in to see what was going on, and Emily had calmed down enough to speak, and when she did, she was apologizing to Jake over and over and over. Then in front of everyone, she confessed she was indeed not in love with Jake, and it was just a facade. A carefully calculated plot to not only hurt me, but also mask her lingering love for Ryan. This confession sent shockwaves through the crowd, prompting gasps and a flurry of whispered speculations. This also prompted more tears from Emily as she sat there hurt. You see, the room had become a stage for raw emotions as everyone tried to process her confession. Jake stood there beside her dumbstruck and looked like he was about to cry. He seemed unsure how to react when the woman he was supposed to marry was now confessing her love for another man on their wedding day. Ryan shifted beside me as he felt uneasy in the situation. Emily had turned into a full-blown Bridezilla. She started screaming at everyone and even broke a few vases, throwing the bouquet of flowers in her hand into the crowd. It was not a pretty sight. Mark and Jane, our parents, stepped in as Emily seemed they did not seem fit to continue entertaining guests. Well, the wedding was canceled, and Mark and Jane apologized to everyone in attendance for the wedding to go astray, and our parents drove Emily home. Jake followed suit along with me and Ryan, and I had an inkling of a confrontation was about to come up, and I was prepared for it. We arrived at our parents' house. The air was filled with tension, and Emily was nowhere in sight. Our parents seemed mortified and unsure how to mediate the unforeseen debacle. Ryan, Jake, and I sat awaiting Emily, and an uncomfortable silence dwelled on us. Emily came out of her room and dried up tears and face contorted with anger. She walked up to me and looked ready to absolutely lose it. I stood up to face her as she yelled, "Why would I ruin a special day like this?" I replied that it was her plan to marry Jake to hide her true feelings about Ryan, and she should be thanking me for bringing Ryan. Had I not done it, she would be in a loveless marriage. Our parents watched as we had a banter. Emily turned to Ryan as if to prompt a response from him, but he was a picture of shock and confusion. He told us he felt torn between his past love for Emily and felt like he was being used in a revenge plot. Emily looked at him with eyes of pity, as she felt more angry at me for using Ryan in such a way. But I was only doing what she did to me with Jake. Jake seemed to catch on that he was unwanted by everybody, and tried to get a word in. I asked him, "Dude, just leave," as his presence only made me more uncomfortable. I was in the midst of this chaos now. My plan of retaliation having spiraled into a dramatic spectacle that I have not intended. Extricating myself from the situation was not going to be easy now. There was chaos everywhere as everyone seemed to be shouting at each other at the same time while Jake sat quietly spectating. A look hurt on his face, and Dad and Mom pulled the group apart and sent Emily to her room. She let Ryan go with her. Ryan and Emily need to talk in private to sort things out and fix any unresolved feelings between them. Mark and Jane motioned it was time for everyone to leave, as Emily and Ryan were more than capable of sorting things out themselves. Mom added that I had done enough to cause drama for the day, and should not cause a rift anymore, and grace everyone with keeping myself away from Emily, and give her a few days just to calm down. So, I need help discerning whether I'm the a-hole for bringing my sister's ex-boyfriend to her wedding, knowing she deliberately was marrying my toxic ex-husband and unintentionally causing a major scene. Update number 2. It had been a few days since I heard back from everyone, and I decided to ask my mother just to give me an update on what happened with Emily and Ryan. She told me Ryan had left not too long after me and Jake, as he had made up his mind that he did not want to be with Emily. Her wedding facade with Jake was more than enough to prove that she had not changed from her past ways. My mom revealed something to me that Emily had later told her in confidence. She said, Emily did that as she has always been jealous of me from the beginning. She was especially jealous of the relationship I had with Jake, so much that she overlooked her own relationship with Ryan. She only realized what an amazing thing she had with him after she had already lost it. And then there was no turning back. Well, Ryan did not plan on getting back together with Emily. He was done with her, and he was in a much better place since then. Emily's confrontation with Ryan gave me an idea of my own. I decided to confront Jake as I needed to get some closure. I would ask him why he was abusive and toxic to me, and he suddenly seemed interested in my sister and almost married her. So, I waited at the coffee shop for him, and he was late as usual. I figured he had not changed in his ways like he had claimed, and Jake walked in and ordered his drink. There was a pang in my chest for a moment, and I wished everything had been alright with me and Jake. I missed being with him, and most of all, I missed the love that he used to give me. Jake was curt with me. Before our coffee even came out, he concluded in a few sentences that he has no further plan to keep in contact with any of my family anymore. He called us weird, and was about to leave before he turned and apologized for it all. He had never wanted to hurt me, but could not help it as he's fallen out of love with me and did not know the right way to get out of the marriage, and he only got together with my sister as he was attracted to her. He informed me that after our divorce, she was the only person who had kept in contact with him, and when he got over his alcohol addiction, they started meeting often. He admitted that Emily might have manipulated him into being into a relationship, and he was shocked when he knew that he was just being used in Emily's plan to get back at me. Jake and I bid our farewells. That would be the last time he would be meeting as I planned to move away. Far away to another city to escape all the drama from my family. Emily did not want to ever talk to me again after what I did to her, and that seemed to suit me just fine. Mom and Dad forgave me for what I did, but maintained it was childish and unnecessary. Had I not done that, Jake and Emily would be married and would be happily ever after together. Well, they claimed. I hardly doubt that with what I know about how Emily truly felt. Anyways, I called Ryan and apologized for using him in my revenge plot, and he said I was no different from my sister as I'd used him to hurt Emily and she had used Jake. He said I needed to sort things out with her or people involved with us would just get caught up in the middle of an old age sibling feud. Well, anyways, that's all. Okay, so let's discuss this one, because this was one of those stories that was just a roller coaster of emotions. And wow, Emily was definitely the most hated character in the story, but I think they're overlooking Jake. I mean, Jake was abusive. He laid his hands on OP, so in my opinion, that automatically makes him the worst character. Even though I'm not sticking up for OP's sister, what she did is also inexcusable and very, well, downright rude. Let me know who you think was the worst character in this story. Go ahead and drop your opinions down below in the comment section. Guys, thank you so much for joining me on today's story. I hope you enjoyed it. It was jam-packed with emotions and a lot of drama, that's for sure. You can almost guarantee anytime a story involves a wedding on this channel, it's going to be a nightmare. Alright, that's going to be all the content for today. If you want more daily videos, go ahead and click that subscribe button. I post every single day, so you never want to miss out on that. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and just remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya.